All right, today I'm going to show, I'm going to do a copy. All right, action. All right, today what I'm going to do is do a copy of a Wyeth painting. I used to have this poster on my wall, and it breaks out of the norm. I think one of the beautiful things that I think about when I see this is that there doesn't always have to be a perfect way to kind of do a composition. You know, the ones that kind of break out, and really, it's even like, what is the genre is a good question as well. So the ones that kind of break out and make us think differently, I honestly think that that's where art really is this idea of like, you know, where we want it to be and then where it goes. And I think there's kind of two different ways of course, duality is just the way in which I think about everything. And this is definitely just a great place for me to kind of explore it. So continue to explore other artists' work. Find the ones that push you to think differently. So I'm just going to loosely get the drawing in here. Again, the beautiful thing about Vine's charcoal is that if it's kind of in the wrong place, I can move it. But, you know, Andrew Wyeth is one I think is just a wonderfully study. The reason for that is that, you know, I mean, look at these abstract shapes, by the way. The thing about Wyeth that's wonderful is that I don't think he ever had the pressure of painting for money. I think, of course, we all kind of have the commerce concept, but it's like, what is it? It really, to me, when I look at his work, I'm just like, his dad was a painter, his son is a painter, and I mean, that's the gist of the composition right there. It should be something that you can get quickly with drawing, and if you can't, then work on drawing so that you can at least get that very quickly. It's not perfect, but it's quick. So what I'm going to do is use that as the framework. But anyway, back to Wyeth. The interesting thing about Wyeth and the way that I see him is that he kind of just marched to the beat of his own drum, which is something I love. And he showed in galleries, and his work took off. His dad, who was a famous illustrator, said that Wyeth had something more than what he had, and it's pretty fascinating to kind of think about. So, all right, so let's get into composition and color and the way in which we're kind of viewing this. Now, there's a beautiful kind of oscillation of color when you look at the complexity of this. There's the initial squint down and everything comes together, but the beautiful thing about the way that Andrew Wyeth worked was that his color is always vibrating. There's a warm cool throughout the whole thing. It's something we can explore in the painting. One thing I do want to add to this is that, you know, in addition to composition, if we just think about color, I'm going to put a couple colors out here that really help me to kind of push where I want to go. One of them's going to be, let me just get ultramarine blue. This idea that his palette is very, very, I don't want to say monochromatic. It's very towards the center of the color wheel. And the thing to take note of with that is that it's very limited. You know, it's this beautiful low key low key color. And what that does is it really kind of sets the mood. And you know, I think sometimes the best paintings are the ones that allow us to kind of get into a mood. Look at that, the white is just completely dried up. Let me grab some white here. Now, the wonderful thing about painting and doing these in this short amount of time, or whatever, just in 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, however long it takes you to do these, is not only are you recreating the painting, but you're studying it. And that's my hope, is that, you know, it's not just this one quick little way of thinking of things. Look at this. And the thing I love about burnt umber and ultra is that if I want it to go warm, I add more burnt umber. And if I want it to go cool from my neutral mixture, I'm going to add ultra. right? And I want it to oscillate, and then if I want to pull in another color to pull it in another direction, we're going to add cadmium yellow medium. So what it is this is kind of the mother color almost kind of concept, where I'm working into a base of neutral, and then I'm just going to tip it where I need it. And then if I want to tip it warm or cool, I'm going to leave those kind of at the fringe so that I can tip it whichever way I want to. Now, I'm going to just get some of the drawing in here, and I'm going to grab just a touch of mineral spirits to kind of loosen it up. And, you know, the thing I want to just stress is that if you don't feel good about your, you know, this is a little bit bigger too, by the way. This is a 5x7. Kind of did the math to find out just how the proportions would be more similar to his. But, you know, if you don't feel good about your drawing, this is the most opportune time for you to play. Now, I'm getting just an average of the colors down. But again, what it does is it allows me to play with color over here and see what the heck it is that he was doing. I think that's a wonderful thing. So average it out, kind of find the drawing by doing it this way, you know, just massing it. And a lot of the undertone is going to be what's going to pull through here. And that's a part of it as well. So, you know, one of the things I see here is that, you know, it's very, very monochromatic. The whole thing, not monochromatic, almost achromatic. But I want to push it. It's almost like you simplify it first and then you make it a little bit more complex after. And one way of doing that would be to kind of mass in the shapes. And that's why in a direct manner some artists work that way, because what they do is they're just taking and simplifying the information and they're making it a little bit more complex so that you're not chasing detail. And you know, a lot of the time I find that beginners love detail. They just got caught up in it, and they think, and it's totally fine to think that a painting is good when the detail, like there's a lot of detail. And it's like, that just seems kind of odd of a concept. Almost like you could take that and begin to play with the concept. Like, all right, or challenge it, I should say. So if a painting was just good for detail, and I just find something highly detailed to do a painting of, and I just do a copy of it, is it good? I don't know. I mean, the top of the totem pole for me when it comes to painting is expression. And a form of expression for me is to take and learn the accuracy of it, just like a musician learning the tools to then express the song. So, you know, there's a little bit more blue in there. I almost feel like Prussian may be a better way to go. But let me grab just a little of the cobalt that's already there, and that's been there for a couple days. And then just tap it in there as a color. All right. Just tap it right there. Again, you know, find things that really inspire you to want to paint them, or the work in which you're interested in doing. The thing I wouldn't recommend would be to just go do a version of this painting after, and then just, you know, put a window and put that in the background and then change the jacket. I think it's so like the easiest way to take the data, but it's not you. It's just you with a real love for Wyeth in that sense, you know. And I see that a lot in painting, where it's just, if you know who the original artist is, you're just kind of like rolling your eyes. I see it in music too. You know, there's some musicians that are just versions of other people. And I don't know. The innovators are the ones that are much more interesting, I think. All right, so very, very low chroma palette here. The one thing I also want to just get across, there also seems to be a tiny bit of green as I look at it. Maybe it's just a little bit more of the yellow and the ultra coming together. But, you know, the things I And again, this just makes me think differently once I stare at it longer and just soften the edge, because the more you kind of look and the more you saturate yourself with anything, the more deeper you will have, which is really why my intention is to get you to think. It's not mindless. There's nothing mindless about good art. That's the Degas quote. Art is easy when you don't know what you're doing, and then it's hard or very difficult when you do, because it becomes much more complex. And the questions that should be are asked are, what is it that I want to say? And what I want to say is an individual thing, and it should not be put on by a teacher. If that person is telling you have to do something in a certain way, then I don't feel like they're guiding you in the correct direction. And then you have to listen to them on everything that they say, and then you're just, if there's the three transformations of the soul or spirit by Nietzsche, then you're the camel, and you don't get past the camel, and then you're just put the load on me and tell me where to carry it. My whole idea that I want to give everybody is the sense of individuation, you as the individual with your own perspectives that you bring to this. Now, there are many different ways that you can kind of take this neutral, and I begin to play. John Cleese talks about it in his talk, which I've posted, and that is just that there's, look at that, I'm going to play up the green a little bit, and that is just that, there's a center that I can come out of. The center is the simplicity of it. The complexity is where I kind of push it. And the poster is all about simplicity. And I know that that's the essence of this, but I can get carried away in the beautiful rapture of this. And therefore, it becomes my own thing. I don't need somebody to tell me what a poster study has to be. It becomes, and this is where I began to challenge all of everything in my thinking and everything that I did, which is just like the poster becomes whatever it is I want it to be, and it functions for me in whatever way that I need it to. If it's a collection of data, if it's often a little tangent, it begins to become what it is. And sometimes, that doesn't help you if you have to say it has to do something. Sometimes that does help you. And that's a thing you just really need to kind of work out in your studio, is that this is a beneficial tool for us to do what with, and you fill in the blank. I think it's the beginning of many different things. It's the beginning for me of the concepts of studying other masters, playing with color, and now can I apply this concept over to my own work? So I'm going to mix the yellow into the pool, and that's just going to lower the chroma and pull it towards the center. And then I'm just going to put that color in there. And what that does is it pulls it away from just yellow, and it taints it into this kind of, the way that I think about it, cohesive way of pulling the color together. So it's not just yellow. It's yellow influenced by the kind of whole light or color over the whole picture. And I think there's a difference between, the simplicity, again, of what color is it, and then what color do I want to play up. And I think a lot of the times the simplicity can override, or just our initial kind of concept of what we think and then what it can be. And then I let the painting kind of pull me in a direction in that sense. Hopefully that makes sense. There's a playfulness is all I'm trying to say in the data, and how I'm, look at that, it almost looks like green, and how I'm applying it. So it's, again, fall back on good drawing. That's what good painting is. And if you skip that part of it, and then you just go into, not drawing and painting, and I find that a lot of commercial artists don't, then you skip on the whole thought process of what is it I want this to be. So get in here and actively begin to think about what all this is and what it is you want it to be. And I think it's the beginning of thought. Everything about this is thoughtful, mindful, and I can't stress that enough. All right, so now I'm just remixing again, getting back in. As again, I don't mix a big pool. It'd be easier to kind of put this on more like I was painting a house or something like that, and then just take and mix a big glob of it, and then just slap it on. Grab a big brush and fill the whole painting with it. But in the imperfection of this, because it's also a study, there's so much to just learn in the sense of if I accidentally pull it in a different direction and I'm not open to it, there's a possibility that the color may actually get better, or that there's a better decision to be made. So it begins to stay in a very open mode. All right, but I think the whole idea of pre-mixing to me is just feels like anti-art. It feels like you're painting a wall at home in your studio. And I remember Leo Mancini Huresco, a good friend of mine, and we talk about this stuff all the time. He said, one of his teachers said, don't paint it like you're painting a wall. Don't paint a color like you're painting a wall or a painting. That's very flat. And the flatness of that is going to flatten out the painting. So now I'm just going to pull more blue in and just tip it just to see what happens when I taint it. So there's an exploration. There's such a wonderful exploration, I think, in even this painting, this little study, that it's becoming its own morphing way of kind of playing with the data and pulling it where you want to. Again, I'm not going to swatch this and then put it there. Maybe that's the way you want to do it. It's not something I've ever been interested in. It's not anything that anyone ever has done in any atelier that I've ever been in. We never had color chips or grids or anything like that. I think sometimes I see it as a function of just people on Facebook and social media with just no training or just wanting an audience. And that audience, I think, dictates just, let's just make it easy. And then sometimes things turn into it looks like an online paint and sip or something, which are just something I totally avoid. The whole idea behind, really, when you get into all of this and you begin to look back at what the master said, the one that that's why we should always look back, the ones that wrote books about it, is that it was always about understanding that we cannot get what we see up in front of us. The mimetic is not something in which we're even after. There's a function of it or an element of it, but once we depart, the art seems to begin. And that's where even Gustav Rehberger, when John DeMartin talks about it, says when the model ends is when the art begins. Pretty fascinating concept because it's not talked about enough. All right, so let's come over here. I want to get the big effect of the light. Again, just going to grab a lot more paint. Again, if this painting gets off the rails and you took a risk, put the risks to the side. See what the risk is after, because there's a difference between just painting mimetically and studying something and seeing what you derived. And then sometimes I like to just look at it as well, let's just look at its own thing of not being mimetic and not deriving from something, and what is there actually in the art in itself to analyze. And I think that's a different way. It it begins to layer in the concept of everything that we do is going to add to something, and therefore we have to be kind of open to that data. And if we're closed to the concept of data, and we're purely just looking for this one thing, that's what Cleese is saying in his creativity talk, creativity, on management on creativity. Then it's like you're never self-assessing. And I think we should. All right, so then down. All right, and now, you know, it's got some relationships going on there. Again, just let's pull some of that green up in here. I think even a dabbing approach could get you a different mark than, you know, not than doing it the other way. All right, let's pull this up, or down, touch. So compositionally, I begin to kind of dissect this once I kind of get into it, and it's like it's pretty fascinating the way in which he's either mindfully doing it or unconsciously just really good at composition. And Wyeth is such an awesome one to study because it just breaks the mold of what we think, and then I begin to kind of look at this and go like, not all compositions work in a very specific way. For example, there's not one way to do one. So then I find off of this, I shoot to pull this down. Again, that may be too light, but now there's a storm, it almost looks like, emerging from the back. Just gonna go into this beautiful neutral that he has and just add something. And now that there's something there, we're gonna just pull it where it needs to be. Again, this is such a wonderful place even to begin to explore pigments. If you want to try one out, this is just like very low stakes place to do it. Here's a beautiful kind of key right here, right there, where that relationship right there is going to help me to get this. Look at this very limited palette that I'm using. This kind of yellow. Just going to get this and pull it up in to get this relationship, and it's kind of the key, you know, value, where values kind of come together is really always the bridge in a painting. I don't know, just kind of making up names now for what it is, but there's a relationship there, and I need to, if this moves and this all has to get dark too, I just begin to kind of pull things over in the order that they need to, so that I can get that to set this up, you know. So there's that, but then there's like, oh wow, that's high contrast, this is high contrast, which way is the eye going? And then he's pulling you towards the center as well. There's a luminosity to it as well. I feel like the luminosity is also a function of the iPad. I have to be careful not to chase it too much. And then there's the piece of artwork or the study that you do of it at the end, which is its own thing. A piece of data that you pulled that's now a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And now you've pulled something over, and there is something of value in it. You know, it's just a fascinating thing. Just a fascinating way, I think, of even just thinking of the data. All right, now let's pull this down. Let's get a little bit of yellow in there to pull it towards green. Again, just a little ultra in there. I don't have to do every step. And then I think that contrast can come down. If you need to kind of push it along, you can either add oil or terps. I recommend trying either of the two. I'm going to put some oil out just to see if I can, you know, the surfaces always will change a little bit, and therefore you can pull it with oil. You know, and adding oil is not all that bad, depending on, there we go. If you're going to come back a second passage, that's when you just got to be careful about oil. And some people care and some people do not, you know, about materials and layering and stuff like that. But again, it's a place to explore. Nothing about any of this stuff is formulaic. I find that artists that are looking for formulas will begin to put formulas into their work, and you can see it, and you will see it. But then there are those that kind of fish in a different pond, you know, and what it does is it breaks it. And if you don't begin to kind of think this way, the time is now to begin to kind of layer it in. So go towards like adding in something that is perhaps a little bit easier, and you want to use something like the rule of thirds, which I have no problem with. And then you want to add in something that begins to kind of break the status quo of thought, and then it pushes you deeper, and then you're just always kind of between two worlds. I mean, that's actually what this probably should be called, kind of between two worlds of a painting. So anyway, hopefully that helps. It shouldn't be something that confuses you. I think all good things are between big modes of opposites, and it evokes thought when you're given two kind of concepts and say, which road will you choose? And instead of picking the two roads, you go straight. That's a wonderful concept in itself. Came to the fork in the road and went straight. All right, so there's that. And again, the colors, the painting's kind of getting a little bit of colorful in spots, and you want to be careful. But maybe you just witness your own hand in the end of what it is you bring to it as well. You know, that's it is what it is. Just leave it. And then that tells me that this can all get just a touch darker. So I'm going to just pull this down. Just pull that as a straight line. If you're not good at drawing straight lines, practice them. I try to avoid rulers and stuff like that. I just feel like I think I'm just scarred from them, from when I used to rule everything in high school, and I look back at them now and I'm glad that I did it. But it just appears to me that like no one was teaching me that there was even some kind of expression in it, and or thought of expression. All right, so let's grab a little bit of oil, loosen that passage up. Right. Now the oil may have a different feel to it than if I had added mineral spirits. So what is that? What's the feel that you like about it? Again, you got to begin to ask. Look at how low chroma this whole scene is, you know? All right, so just grab a big hunk of color. Bring it down. Again, when's the time you're going to be bold and daring? When will that time arrive? You know, if you always desired to do it, and the time is now. And begin to think about it, because it's, you know, we have all these things in which we're like, one of these days I'm going to add more paint, and I'm going to paint with more paint, and then I just never paint with more paint. Therefore, it's just an ever-going concept of someday, right? And the answer to that is today. That's when you're going to do it. So grab more paint. If you always want to add more paint, then add more paint. Because if you're going to break a habit, you have to do it. You have to begin to do it. And the time is always now. Begin the thought. And then that's the beginning of a concept that you will begin to have to crack. All right, so let's bring this over. Maybe add a little bit more light to it. Kind of pulling the painting and keying it. There's also what's called chromatic aberration that he's getting across here in the painting. Quite fascinating. And what that means is that the color, whether he saw it or not, he was putting it in as a way to kind of add color, perhaps, to the painting. And that is that in the edge of shadows, you may see a little bit of color. People don't always see it, and sometimes people or artists will put it in, and I think that's just a wonderful form of expression, in my opinion. When I see it, I think it's just wonderful to put in that there's a chromatic aberration, like a blue happening there. Do we see it? I don't think so. I bet you he didn't see it, but doesn't mean you don't have to put it. That's, again, you can push the color or the painting, or make it say whatever it is you want it to say. All right. Pull this down. into the center, and then I'm just going to add oil to it, loosen it up, take some ultra in there, and then burn umber. And what it does is it's going to darken it, keep it in that color space, and then let's just glob it on. Again, this is the essence of the painting that we're after, and then the composition is what we study from it. So I've got those things together, a little bit of black in there, and maybe just dab the edges. So much more about what makes Andrew Wyeth so good is so much more than just, of course, composition. And again, that's just the entry point, I think, into beginning to analyze something beautiful like this. Let's grab a little bit of cad yellow medium, put a little bit more out. Sometimes I find that, like, when I was painting, I would make, when I began to care a little bit less, just very, sometimes, not always, the thought process was like you're too articulate, and then when you began to let go a little bit, the painting was able to come into being, rather than kind of over articulating. One of the things I remember one of my mentors said was unity first, variety second, and therefore, the painting has to feel unified. You can't just chop it up, and that's what I find, that details sometimes just chop things up, and they don't unify them. So what I used to do is grab mineral spirits, unify the passage, and then break it back up. And you would find, I just did it again in a painting the other day, and I think somewhere in that process between order and chaos was a beautiful, beautiful thing, but you have to be willing to let it go in order to do it. All right, so let's just begin to analyze this, and there almost seems like there's little, like, unifying story and story kind of thing, where it's like story, 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 and it's almost like a triptych, which I find fascinating. I think it's one of the reasons why I just absolutely love the painting. All right, then there's the wet into wet approach in which I'm doing this. So there's the application of the paint of being able to kind of pull this down into it, and now just say, like, all right, maybe that's two, like two opposites just go back and forth, and somewhere in the middle could be just that neutralish green that I'm searching for. Don't want to pop, like, it's mixing on the canvas too. That's the thing, and it's just like, don't be afraid to try it. That's why a lot of students want to hear all these things of what not to do, and then they will never explore them. And if I put all those shackles on you, then you'll say, well, I can't do that because so and so said. And they want those. They always want, like, some rule. I'm always asked of, like, what's the rule for this? And it's like, the rule is that there's no rule. But go operate like there's a rule, and then go operate like there is not a rule, and then you'll find you in actually a thought process of what you think of that concept. That's a tough pill to swallow, because it actively engages the audience to think, and I think that's a tough one. It's something that I had to go do and take, where somebody would say something, all my teachers, and then I began to think, like, what do I think about it? And again, it's not that's me in it. That's what my thoughts are. I think it's a wonderful way to kind of take the data. All right, to look at, just, again, it's almost like three worlds together. Very almost cinematic, I think, in which there's such a long story of what it is. The reason I think I love this painting is for its narrative qualities of, this person went there, but then there's also, like, they came in, hung their coat, but there's opportunity, or that's where they were at, so it's like this kind of narrative to pull you through. That doesn't mean that that's the way that you'll see it, by the way. So off of this, I can kind of shoot in. Again, I'm not sight sizing or anything like that. I don't know. I guess you could if you really wanted to. At the end of the day, my only thing I say about anything is just don't use it as a crutch. If that's the only way that you can do things, then that's the only way you can do them. Now begin to kind of work on how to remedy that so that you can work in any way with any tool that's given to you. And it's the same thing I expressed to the students at Lyme. It's just that you can work in a sight-size method, and they teach them that. And then let's not work in a sight-size method, and then you begin to think of the limitations of what each of those, do. When do I use a sight-size method? When do I use comparative measurement? And the thing is to say, when do I, right? Not when do you, because when I put it on, say you, then it sounds like I'm putting a rule on you. And that's not what it's about. So, all right, then there's again, just slapping it on. What do these marks look like when you do a wet into wet? Again, that's something that I began to kind of just dissect and think about. Like, what happens when there's wet into wet or wet over wet? And, what happens if I do leave it a little bit looser? The Robert or William Merritt Chase quote. I said Robert. Which is just, it takes two artists to paint, one to stand behind with an axe before the artist destroys it. Like, there's beauty in just the marks. And then you begin to kind of look at your own handwriting and analyze it, and then begin to say, which way do I want to go with it, right? So that's kind of the gist of the painting right there. And again, there's just room for speckling in some color if you want to. I don't know. Don't let it get away from you too much, and keep the bigger picture in mind, because we're going to analyze this as a piece of data when I'm done with the painting. But I've actively put it back together, and now I'm going to analyze what I found in the putting together. So it's the beauty of this process. It's the study. It's the thought. It's getting into the mind of the person. And then when you actively layer this in because you've recreated it, you may find yourself beginning to think differently. And I think that's just a wonderful thing. That just a passage of light that opens to the wall. And there's tiny little details in here. It doesn't mean you have to put in, there's a starfish at the top of the window. Do you want to put it in? Up to you. You don't have to. Not to say that one is right and one is wrong. If it tickles your fancy and makes you happy, put it in. All right, so that's kind of the gist of the whole thing. And again, it's very sloppy in a beautiful way, but you got to be careful of just keeping in mind what you're trying to do here, and that is to study it and not recreate it. The essence of this, something like this, is quick, and you can just take this into your own studio and then begin to say, this is the big general, and maybe I want to set up a triptych as well in my compositional study. All right, it still feels like it can add a couple more things to it to just pull it together. One of them is going to be this. Plug that bar over, and then that pushes this up a little bit. And then he has kind of some nice warmth in here of, notice the small little details. They are a part of the composition. That right there, which is just the starfish up on the window. I don't think they're just sitting there. I bet you put them in. And then putting in these, which is just a repetition of color. And, again, the details have to sit in. The global has to sit with the global first, the local second, and it's like now they feel like they're floating. So how much into the details do I want to get? Just put a dab, and then there's a ridge, of course, and all that stuff. But again, how much into the details, now we find ourselves back in the painting, and it's like, I don't know. Be careful. That's what I would say. Yellow right there. Look at the repetition of color. The yellow here. Yellow, yellow, right? Yellow dabbed into the shadow. Oscillation of warm, cool. Don't want to get in there and have to articulate anything too much. A piece just coming out of the shadow. This ultra, I mean, look at how limited the palette is too. I'd say Prussian may be a better muted choice. That aberration, just kind of hitting up the notes. You can even overdo it a little bit if it reminds you of the color schemes, meaning that I can just leave that to be a little bit more present, just to remind me that there's a warm, cool going on. The recreation and the study of it is really where it's at.